first of all, thank you for having us.
You're very welcome, Anne-Marie and Peter. I wasn't really expecting this, but I know my age was probably the biggest factor in deciding it.
Have you memories, Paddy, of World War II?
I do. I was a World War baby. I was 2 years old in the World War. And I don't remember the World War as such. I might have remembered coming up to the later years. What I do remember about the later years was my father used to always get the paper, and as the Allies started to move towards Berlin, there was an arrow on the map that kept showing that they were moving all the time, and I used to follow that, and I knew that, but that would be as much as I would have known. But what I do remember was the hardship and the scarcity. Now, men couldn't get razor blades. I saw men trying to sharpen a blade in a glass, turn it around in a glass. You couldn't get tires for a bicycle. You couldn't get cigarettes. Your tea and sugar was rationed. Food in the country, farmers and their workers were well looked after because they lived off the land, and the workers always brought home the milk and the food. But it was very grim in the cities, in the slums. They didn't have that, or even in the towns. For Tumna now, we had people coming out, we had a good lot of timber, and they used to come out for the fallen timber. They couldn't get turf. It was a wet year. 1 year was a wet year, and nobody got any turf. And I remember the hardship coming home after school, doing my homework, and going down to Nile Lab with my father to saw timber with a bad cross cut because you couldn't get a file to sharpen it. And my grandmother used to save up her sugar ration for the two of us. I had one sister, for the two of us. And that was it. Of course, to say I was spoiled, I wouldn't eat brown bread. No, brown bread at the time was black bread. Could be made of rye. And my mother used to have to go to Williams in Portumna to buy a white loaf for me. So I suppose I was spoiled. But that was that. But sure. Then of course there was no petrol. You couldn't use the car. We had timber, and they used to burn charcoal down in the woods. The timber that's sawed up and put into a kiln and burn it and bank it down for a while.
Paddy, can you tell me your earliest memory? What is it?
I wasn't born in the house here. I was born where Youth and Duggan is now. I suppose my earliest memory would be looking at photographs. I remember helping, or supposedly helping, my father when he was sieving gravel and I had a shovel. And looking at the photograph, I suppose that would probably be my earliest memory.
Yeah. Can you remember starting school?
I can. I started school, I was 6 now when I was going to school. I was a late starter. And the village lads used to start earlier because they didn't have as far to walk. Now we walked all the time. And our neighbours, the Maddens in the church parks, they brought me to school. And when I went to school, my first teacher was Miss Flynn from Carrigahorig. She was a very nice woman and a nice teacher. And she was the first, all right. And then I went into second, Mrs. Mahan. And then I went on to Mick Cronin in the seniors. Now, that was in the old school where Paddy Mara lives now. And the junior classes were upstairs. And the senior classes were down on the bottom. And then we moved to the new school, as we called it, the new school, in 1948. And that was grand. The other was very basic.
Now, when you say the new school,
that's the St. Preston School.
Oh, right, okay,
Yeah.
1948.
Yeah, 48, yeah. And well, it should have been called St. Rowan's, but Rathcabbin had got that name first, because that had been first. But sure, I was happy enough in school there now, and while I wouldn't be the top of the class or I'd be reasonable. But we had some very talented students, and they were a nuisance because that was always the benchmark that we had to live up to.
Okay.
And maybe we could, but we were too lazy.
When you were a little fella going to school, what was your favourite subject?
I was quite good at English and geography. And I would be still now watching quizzes and mentioning quizzes. We had a very good question time team, or table quiz.
Right.
We had Helen Ward. She was exceptionally good. She was great on books. And we had Declan O'Mara and myself. And then we'd have maybe different ones. Now, early in the years, Parry, my son, he suited it grand because he was into sport and dates and all that kind of thing. Well, I'd be good at geography. And there was one day we had Siobhan O'Mara, and we were asked the question, what did the DNA mean? So naturally enough, that was in her barrel, because she was a doctor.
Yes.
So that was basically our team, but it changed over time. So
Can you remember some of the games you used to play going to school?
when hurling would be the principal that we lived for hurling, especially out the field. At the back of the field, we mightn't even finish our lunches to get out to hurl. And that was what we lived for. It was the only thing. And even when I was in my teens, we used to go over to, official trainer was in Miles Field at the Pike. But there was every player, there was somebody training, they were playing at Curragh Cross, they were playing in Redwood, Redwood Cross, and we were playing in Paddy Dermody, which was Parry's now. And the company of maybe 40 of us there at that time.
My God.
Yeah. And I remember one time Tony Red was in goals and I scored a goal. And he said that was a good score, and that was high praise.
I'm telling you, of course it was.
But that would be mainly it. And we used to play handball in the winter when we went to the new school, as they call it, that all stopped because we couldn't go down to the ball alley. And the country lads didn't get a chance to practice. So 4 of us kept it on: Paddy Corrigan, who died young, Mikey Redden, Alfie Dyer, who's now no longer with us, and myself. And we kept it going for a long time. And Paddy got married and left, and we couldn't find a fourth.
Okay.
So that finished handball in Lorrha. But Paddy and myself were the last two to play championship handball. We played minor championship handball. And back in the day, when I'd be very young, handball was a big thing in Lorrha. You wouldn't have a chance of getting a game, and there were some very good handball players in Lorrha. There was son Ryan, he was the local postman, Johnny Abbott, Joe Abbott, Christy Holahan, he went to live up in Mead or somewhere, and a few more, Harold Dyer, a few more like that. They were excellent handballers.
What did you do after leaving secondary school?
I have regrets there. I never went to secondary school. And I regret that. And I went to Pallaskenry, or was sent to Pallaskenry, to Agricultural College. And my parents thought, I suppose, that was the best option.
And what age were you then?
I wasn't exactly 15 when I went in there. I spent a year there and then came home to what basically was slavery.
And was this straight after primary school, or
straight after primary school? Yeah. Well, I might have been waiting from June to September for that, and I don't know. Looking back on it now, when I say I regret not going to secondary, I think I should have gone to what they called a vocational school at the time, because you learned a lot of trades there.
Now, what would have been the nearest secondary school to you at the time?
It would be down there, what we call the back street in Portumna,
Okay.
and Father Jordan set it up. But that was a boys' school. There was a secondary top for the girls, and my sister and a few of the locals here went to that afterward. And then my sister went on to Banagher to La Santa Union there.
But you were probably needed at home anyway, were you?
Well,
To
I
help.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
And conditions were grim now at that time. It was all spade work. There was no
Okay.
in comparison with now.
So you must have seen a lot of changes in farming.
I've seen so many changes in farming, and they're still changing. That time it was all muscle power, and you'd be boiling potatoes for pigs and all that kind of stuff. And you were kind of living off the land at the time, and then you'd have to be sowing various crops. You'd have wheat, barley, and oats, and the wheat would. That was thrashed, of course, the old way, and it was brought down to the canal or the harbour there at the bridge, loaded onto the barges and brought up to Banagher, to Wallers. Now, that was heavy work at the time. The barley was 16 stone a barrel, the wheat was 20, and the oats was 12. Now, the wheat was heavy. There was a lot of lifting, and sure, we had to do that. We did it, and that was that. But as we moved on a lot, when I took over when I was 24, and my father came here. He had a farm in Coolers at the bottom of Rathcabbin, and his grandfather bought a farm. Now, when we be considered, I suppose, Bloyns here, my grandfather had a long presence in Coolers. He bought a fairly substantial farm in the late 1800s or maybe early 1900s, and then he bought a second one. Now Paddy Dermody has that farm that he bought, and my father swapped it for here.
Was that a land commission
Land
exchange?
commission, yeah, he swapped it for here. Now it was very run now. He came here. If you sowed a crop, the wireworm eat it. If you sowed beet, the rabbits eat it. It was overrun with everything, and the soil was run down to nothing. So he did the best he could, and he brought it to a certain stage. And then I tried to bring it on another bit, and when I took over, I bought a tractor, and I got mechanised by degrees, and it wasn't easy. Money was scarce.
Can you remember by any chance how much you paid for that tractor?
I do.
Go on.
Down to the last. It was a Nuffield Universal 3. I paid £600 to Jackie Delahunt in
It was a
Ballygarry.
lot of money at the time.
You're bloody right.
Yeah.
I was a while paying it back.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I bought it for £600, and there was what I would call a lawnmower or a mowing machine seat on it, and I paid £10 extra for a soft seat. No cab, no nothing.
And when was that?
That would be 24. That'd be 1961. So then I had to gear up with machinery and everything, and took good time. But I rented land and out around. I had no money worth talking about, and I rented land and I ploughed all I could, everything. And I had 2 great harvests, and there were dry harvests, and I had 2 great harvests, and it got me out of trouble. And but then, having said that, I lost a lot of harvests.
Of course.
You know, you reckon at that time, if you got 3 good years out of 5, it's probably the same still, and you were doing okay. But you'd have mixed farm at that time. You had pigs and you had everything, and my mother would have geese and hens, and she basically ran the house on the eggs and that kind of thing.
Now, when you'd have a bad harvest, would the winter be tough on you, money-wise?
It would be tough on me, very tough, and it would set you back it would set you back a couple of years. Now, I had a very good harvest, or a very bad harvest. No, I had a bad harvest, but I got brucellosis at a nearly stage when there was nobody getting it. And
what age were you, Paddy, when you got brucellosis?
I was married, it could be about 34, but no, that was the cows got it.
Yes.
And I was about 34, and I had to get out of everything. There was no compensation that time. And I had to get out of everything, and I bought cattle, and I sold them for less than I paid for them. And that would have been a very bad time, but Lola was working, and she backed me up.
Of course she did.
So without her, and she backed me up a lot of times. But that was it. We moved on anyhow from it, and we got married in '69. I said I'd never get married unless I had a house. And I had the house built.
Yes.
So it was very basic. We got wedding presents for a lot of things, like cutlery and delphine.
Very practical.
And of course the usual half a dozen toasters.
That's right.
But then you ran the past them was because we weren't getting married at the same time.
And ironing boards probably and stuff
Right.
like that.
Well, I can't remember the ironing boards, but that was it anyhow. No carpets, no nothing on the floors, no tarmac, and we had quarry dust and it all came into the house and everything. Eventually we got to where we were, and even though it's a new house, we never stopped doing improvements.
No, we do.
How about the water scheme?
Yeah, we started a water scheme here back, I don't know how long ago it is, and we got it. Was the engineer told me it was the easiest water scheme we ever got, or he ever dealt with. All the landowners let us go inside into the fields. We made things very simple, and we had a committee, and the committee ended up in the finish, two of us, Noel Madden and myself. I was treasurer. Greg Hughes was chairman. He lost interest after a while. Francis Rice went to Australia, New Zealand, and I became general downsbody.
So did you have to go around then and actually collect money from
Well,
everybody
we had
else?
at that time our committee did that,
Okay.
and we collected. I think it was £200 at the time each. Maybe it was lower than that, but we get back money when we had the scheme finished.
And when did water scheme started? When did you start with that?
Can't remember that now. It would be, I'd say sometime in maybe the early 90s. I think we had to pay it to the council at the time, and I used to have to collect the money and send it on. But then the council took it over, and they put it on the road because they wanted to have free access to the road, because the farmer could stop them anytime. We never got away leave or anything. And the council took it over, and God did the air on it, because I think from the corner there down to the ferry to solid rock. To spend ages with rock breaker doing it, we wouldn't have been able to do that. And we knew that, of course, we knew the terrain. And that was it. We still have it.
Were you involved in Mockra?
I was. I was involved. I was chairman of Mockra Firma for a few years.
And when was that now roughly?
And I'd be back now in the 50s.
Okay.
Back in the 50s. And it was a great help to, we learned a lot from Mockra Firma, knowledge that we wouldn't have otherwise. We used to go to field days, and we had question time teams, and we had public speaking and a whole lot of that kind of stock judging. I was fairly successful at the stock judging, and we were excelled, very good at the question time. Now, that time you had to stand up on the stage, and I had a photograph, and I can't find it. We won the Tipperary quick question time team. We had Laird Leeson, Frida Dolan, Billy Carroll, and myself.
Wow.
We had a good team, and we weren't expected to need it with Nina and Borsican and all them bigger clubs, but we did anyhow. That was it. But then I got involved in IFA, and took part in all the protests and picketing the jails and all that time. and lucky not to be arrested.
And can I ask you, what were you picketing against?
Well, the government wouldn't recognise us. We had no say. And there was a minister made a speech in Lorrha and called the IFA gangsters. So we didn't like that.
No.
But anyhow, we decided we were going to disrupt all the bridges were going to be blocked in the one day. Now it wasn't very popular with the public, naturally enough. But I was the first onto the bridge with my tractor. And another Tom Kelly from Lorrha arrived with his tractor, and that blocked the traffic. Now there was some arrested, but there was a lot arrested on the Galway side because you had a very busy guard there, and we had a sergeant who was very lenient, and there was only one arrested from Tipperary, and he wasn't in his area. So he helped us out, but his heart wasn't in it. Like.
How long did it take you to get government recognition?
It took a long time. Oh yes, before I get away from the bridge, we had emergency measures that if a doctor or a vet or anything had to come, and they could get through. And of course the press claimed we stopped doctors and vets there, which we didn't. But we did stop Canon Hamilton. He was PP in the mines at the time, and he was going somewhere. We stopped him, and we offered to let him go back. He wouldn't go. He sat there all day. He was very stubborn. He sat there all day, and then a master of the hunt came, and he came. He was very arrogant, of course. He was a double barrel name, and he came and he got hold of the car and says, "Who owns that car there?" And the fellow from Borsican shouts, "Bowmaker." No, Bowmaker were the Linden agency at that time. So that he was left there fuming. So eventually it was lifted, and there was consequences after, and nothing happened. And DC from Terry Glass was the president of IFA at the time, and he was in the army, but a lot of the press thought it was the British Army. But he wasn't in the British Army, he was in the Irish Army. He was a captain in the Irish Army. So he was a big help. So he decided that they'd walk from Kinsale to Dublin, and they'd be picking up extra along the way. And they all walked, the walk from here, or the walk from the main road there along by what they call Kilcarn. And they picked up all the way then from Offaly, and they got to Dublin, and the government wouldn't see them. So they sat down on the steps outside, and they stayed there until the government relented. And of course we all came up, and there was thousands
Wow.
there at the time.
I hear you have a bit of history in the family, of old Irish history.
Well, I would, but I'd be a bit reluctant to go into it now. I would have with the War of Independence, but I wouldn't touch the Civil War. But my parents were very active in the Civil War, or the War of Independence. Both my mother and uncle and father, but I think the Canderstown area, the Steve Brooms, they were very active there, and there was a lot of cover in the Steve Brooms. And my mother, she was an officer in Cumanamon, an area or a group or an organisation that never got the recognition that was due to them.
Can you tell Anne-Marie the things that Granny used to do?
Oh yes, I forgot about that. She used to carry dispatches. And
Now, what year would this be, give or take?
well, sort of between 1916, I think it was 22, that somewhere along there.
Yes, yes.
And she would have been very young at the time. She carried dispatches, and somebody told me one time, there was a great historian in Canterbury at the time, Paddy Dermody, he's dead now, and he told me about her, that she she went to Killarney now, that'd be a good bit down from Canterstown, and delivered, well, it could be goods or dispatches. And she had to go through the fields at night after 2 o'clock and be home before 4. So she did that, and a lot of other things too. She was the liaison officer between Northlip and Offaly, and her contact was Billy Carroll's uncle, Billy Carroll. And the Carroll family and ourselves were friendly for back then. And that was her story. I'm sure there's a lot more to it. Then when her uncle or her brother took the anti-treaty side, his commanding officer from the Troubles came to arrest him, and she hit him with a bicycle pump.
Good woman.
So she was hardy, and so was all her her mother, her aunts and granddaunts. They were tough women.
Do you think the women's role in all of this should have got more recognition?
It definitely it never got the recognition it deserved, because it wouldn't have been a success without them. They were in key positions. Women were in the offices. They were in some of them could be in Dublin Castle. They would be in the post offices and all those things. And they carried the information from one place to another. And that was how the war was won. Not so much by violence, I know violence came into it, which is a pity, but that was how it was won. It shouldn't be won without them. And I see very little recognition of, well, you might say nearly not recognition of the coming of on. I think it's a pity. And but sure, I suppose doing the same thing now still with women. It's probably carried on to a lesser extent, but it's still there. So I wouldn't be a fan of that.
What age did you say you were, Paddy? 85?
I'll be 85 at the end of September.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you sit here in your 84th year,
Yeah.
what is the thing that makes you happiest?
Well, I retired at 65 and I handed over to my hall. Now I inherited at 24, and I said if I ever had a son, I'd do the same and let me on with it. And I retired, took the year of retirement.
You were proud to hand over the farm to your son.
I was, yeah. But I wouldn't have been able to retire only for it.
Yes.
And that was a big help. And they were very anxious to get young farmers taken over. And I moved it on as much as I could. We always moved it on a lot more.
Paddy, what is probably the best changes you have seen?
The hydraulic pump. Henry Ferguson, he took all the hardship out of farming and lifting in every respect.
The hydraulic pump.
The hydraulic pump. And the next big thing for the women was electricity.
That's right.
Yeah. And I'm able to lift up, I was able to lift 2.5 ton bags with my finger.
That's right.
You know. And that was what took all the hardship. You had the hydraulic plough then rather than the trailer. You had the automatic, the brakes on the trailers, air brakes. You had all them things.
When you look at the modern day children now, let's say your own grandchildren, you think about your own childhood.
No comparison. Now Deirdre is a special needs, and sure, in my time, if you didn't keep up with the class, you were put back in the back and ignored. And I know fellas that wasn't able to write their name, and they went to England and they came home and built houses here. And I know one particular fellow, he had a wooden leg. He has prosthesis, you call it now, and he built a house below in the hedge. And I meet him when he comes for holidays, and he has his Mercedes SUV. And we were talking one day. I said, what did you do when you went to England, knowing that his education wasn't great? Well, he says, I worked at everything. And any job I could get, I worked at it. And he says, I ended up in making parts for aeroplanes.
So he had it in other ways. He had it
The whole family were terrific workers.
Yes.
And if you went to England and you were a worker, you got on. Or if you went to America and you were a worker, you got on. But a lot of them were workers and didn't get on because the pub was their only pastime.
Do you remember the boats playing a huge role in transport?
You could hear them going up the river from here. They had a single cylinder engine and there's a different sound. It was like tuck, tuck, tuck all the way up. Yeah. And there was a few tractors here now. There was a Steel that had a single cylinder engine. And there was a field marshal, mostly used by the council. It was for crushing stone. And there was a big flywheel on it. And it had to be started by a cartridge because there was no decompression on it. And the first Ford tractors that came, or Ferguson tractors came out, you had to start them on petrol, and you had a decompression lever. You started them on petrol until the engine warmed up, and then you turned over to the diesel. But there was none of the high gadgets that I started with. There was a basic 5 gear. Now you could have 24.
Were you involved in the church in North Cabin?
Oh, I was to be.
And what was your role there, Paddy?
I was chairman.
Were you really?
Yeah, anything that was going, I was always nominated for chairman, and I never looked for it. But I always felt that if someone thought I was fit to do the job, I'd take it on. But it took up a lot of my time.
Oh, it was.
I did, yeah. Maybe a lot of my time when they should be staying at home. But that was the way it went anyhow. I remember with the committee meetings for the church, I remember we had 7 meetings in 5 days.
And how did you manage the fundraising for the church?
Oh God, sure, that was long. No, the people in the parish were very good and very generous. And that gave us a great boost. And then we started going outside the parish, and we raffled a house. And the tickets were £100. And I came home and told Nolan. Now, Father T. Seymour was a great organiser.
He was.
And I suppose he'd be the main man. But I came home and I told Nola. She says, "You're mad, who's going to give £100 for a ticket?" When she'd finished up and she was in Mercy Cage, they'd be going to her in the street where to buy a ticket. And we made, I think it was 18,000 on that. But what we did was, we got people to sell them on commission. And we got other parishes to sell them. We'd cover the prices, and they'd get half the money. And that was a big take. Like there was parishes that bought them that would never hear of Lorrha, but they still got half the money that was collected. Eventually, we got $500,000 together, which was a lot of money at the time. And we did up the parochial house in Rathcavan. Lorrha had been done already, and we done up the two schools in Leacope, and we had money left over. And we had 54,000 left over when Father Joe Kennedy came. And that went to do up the house, a parochial house in Lorrha. It was in a bad state. So that was our fundraising.
What do you feel that is missing from older days in these days now?
Oh, I'd love to bring in more neighbourliness, where everyone knew everyone else. And there was no doors locked, and you walked into every place without knocking. But that's what I would like to see coming back. But I wouldn't like to see the hardship coming back, and I wouldn't like to see the treatment children got in school coming back. And I wouldn't like a lot of the way maids and how women were treated. I wouldn't like to see that come back either, because they'd be working for nothing, and they'd be bullied, and they had to put up with it because they needed the money, and they'd be working like slaves.